And there's a skill that's associated with that that's somewhat glib social ability. The Jungians would say, well, you shouldn't, if you don't have a persona, you're just a disaster, but by the same token, you shouldn't be only persona. Because one of the possibilities is that the ego can identify with the persona, and then the person thinks that they are what they show the social world. And the problem with that, at least from the Jungian perspective, is that A, people are a lot more than the persona, they're a lot more than the ego, and B, a lot of the things that make them more than mere persona or more than mere ego are not necessarily things that are acceptable in casual public gatherings. So for example, because of your psychophysiological makeup, you all have the capacity for aggression. Now a lot of you, especially the ones that are more agreeable, you could say that even it's either that capacity for aggression has been underdeveloped because you've identified with a certain mode of social being, or you could say perhaps, if, to the degree that agreeableness is temperamental, that the aggressive tendency isn't as powerful in you as it is in other people. That might lead you to make judgments like, and I'm sure some of you, perhaps some of you who had an angry parent, or particularly an angry father, have decided at some point in your life that to be aggressive is wrong. To be angry is wrong, for example. Or to be aggressive is wrong. It's morally wrong. One of the things that happens in psychotherapy very frequently, though, is that people come into psychotherapy for a variety of reasons. Some of them are merely practical. They're having problems in adaptation because their lives have got very, very complicated and they really don't know what to do about it. Sometimes they go into psychotherapy because they have very high levels of negative emotion, and that can be associated with the first problem. But very often they come into therapy because they're getting pushed around constantly and they really don't have anything that's a sufficiently well-developed personal identity. And generally, that happens, by the way, more often with women than it does with men, and that's because women are, by temperament, more agreeable than men, and perhaps also by socialization. Temperament certainly plays a big role. Often then, the goal of therapy is assertiveness training. And assertiveness training you could think of as the behavioral psychologist's equivalent to incorporating the shadow. So, you know, you may think, well, it's a necessary part of existence to be nice to other people. And there's some truth in that. Not really. It's a very shallow way of looking at the world. Because nice is not a very sophisticated word. But even if that's the word that you do use, you should also be nice to yourself. And sometimes what that means is that you have to put forward your own wishes and desires in a manner that causes a certain amount of conflict. And in order to withstand that conflict, you have to be able to draw on the sources of aggression that in some sense are a deep part of your inbuilt set of possibilities. Now, the reason that's necessary, in part from a biological perspective, is that people are often afraid of engaging in conflict because they're afraid, because conflict can be real trouble. And anger inhibits fear. So if you don't have a well-developed capacity for, well, we could say rage, then you can't overcome your fear, and then you can't stand up for yourself, and then you're going to get run over. Now the problem with that is that if you get run over enough, it'll make you resentful, and then that will make you aggressive, except it'll make you aggressive in sneaky, underground, and somewhat unconscious ways that are much less likely to be productive than, you know, a frank exchange of viewpoints and some conscious negotiation. So one of the things I do in therapy for people who need assertiveness training is I get them to pay attention to their resentment, and resentment is often a good avenue into the shadow, because first of all, resentment is a pretty destructive emotion. It's an extremely useful emotion, but it can be very destructive because it gives rise to, well, first of all, a sense of victimization, and second then, the underground growth of all sorts of ideas of revenge and vengeance, and also a kind of stubborn non-cooperativeness, because who wants to cooperate when they feel taken advantage of?